Until I see the little, there it is. All right, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and call today's meeting to order. And I'll ask the acting clerk to please call the roll. Or I guess we don't have a roll.
Good morning. We should. Mayor Constantine.
I'm here.
Excellent. And we have Council Member Martinez Beltran. She's filling in today. We have a vacancy and I don't see her yet.
No, she's not
and
here.
And I have Board Chair Sullivan.
Present.
And I have Board Member Horner.
Present. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I don't see anybody. Let me check my participants. Yes, there are two members of the community. Oh, Yvonne seems to be on the attendees list. If we could get her to.
Great. I will
move her over.
Okay. Thank you. And let's let her in. And good morning, Councilmember Martinez Beltran. Are you present?
Good morning. I was wondering what was happening because I could see all of you.
Great. I will mark you down as present. Thank you.
All right. And so we are opening public comment. I do see one member of the public. It's a telephone number. So if you are wanting to address us, to raise your hand, you hit *9, and that way I'll know if you wish to address us with public comment. This is for items that are not on this morning's agenda. So not seeing the blue hand go up, then I will go ahead and go back to the panel and ask for a approval of the minutes. Need adoption up to approve the minutes.
I'm happy to move to adopt or to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Board Member Sullivan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Beltran, Martinez Beltran. I guess we'll have to do a roll call vote then.
Okay, Mayor Constantine.
Aye.
And then we have Councilmember Martinez Beltran.
Aye.
And we have Chair Wendy Sullivan.
Aye.
And Board Member Horner.
Aye.
All right, so we'll move on to the first order of business, which is the joint City of Morgan Hill and Morgan Hill Unified School District items. And under that, we have the courtyard next steps.
Yes, and we will have Public Services Director Chris Gioni, who is going to screen share and provide a report.
Good morning, Mr. Gioni.
Good morning. I just had my screen freeze. Hopefully you guys are still there.
Yes.
You're still here.
Seeing the screen. Okay. I know Kirsten or Anessa can jump in on this too, because they've been involved, or will jump in after. And this is an item that went on consent to the City Council and I believe to the school board as well. So you've seen this item and been able to read the report. So I'm going to kind of just give an overview to kind of talk about the next steps for discussion. So it's been, probably 4 or 5 years that we've been discussing future needs at the corporation yard. We, as the city, have a lease agreement with Morgan Hill Unified to rent the bus yard space at the corp yard. And about 4 or 5 years ago, as I think even before the school district was going through the facilities master planning process, there was some desire from Morgan Hill Unified to co-locate all of their maintenance functions, transportation, facilities, grounds at one site. There was also a desire to purchase property either from the city or separately to eliminate the annual lease payment, which hits the school district's operations versus capital budget. And as a city, one of the things we had in the past was a plan to replace the courtyard with park space down the road. However, there had been some changes to that. And when we updated our Parks and Rec master plan in 2017, that need for park space at that location went away because the community had a desire for an additional park space on the basically other side of town. So expanding community park was not a priority for the city anymore. So the master plan for community park changed. With all that being said, as a city, before we could move forward with anything permanent, we had to look at what the space usage is there for our future needs of the city. So at the same time, we partnered with Morgan Hill Unified to look at the future space needs for the district as well, to see what would actually fit on the site. And that's what brought us to this study that was taken to both the council and the board previously. So I'm going to quickly kind of run through the findings in the specific study and then talk about next steps. So if I can maybe do this. There we go. So the process our consultant did is they looked at the existing facility condition. So we have a lot of background on what is still in good shape, what is kind of falling apart, and what needs to be replaced at the courtyard. Nothing there is new and in great shape. I'll just say that. We have space requirements for the current needs, and we have space requirements for the future needs outlined for both. And then we worked on some concept designs, basically space layouts for the site. So this is the existing courtyard site. You can see on the right side of the screen, the buildings at the top side with the darker asphalt are the city corporation yard. And then the lower section is the bus yard, with the exception of the building 4 and kind of that area down at the south or the bottom of the screen, the north end. That's actually used by the city for storage. So kind of the city space kind of sandwiches the bus yard space that the district uses or leases. And then so each building got assigned a code and condition and was reviewed, as I talked about. And so we looked at a couple different scenarios. So we looked at city needs from a standalone perspective. We looked at school district needs from a standalone perspective. And then we looked at school and city operating jointly on the same site and what that could do to save on space needs. And one look at that joint site was on the existing site. One look was on a separate new site, so separate purchased new property. So there were several scenarios that were reviewed. One of the things that happened is when we looked at combining all of the functions of the school district, so grounds, facilities, transportation, and the future needs and the future needs of the city on the existing site, we ended up with a building that looked like a Costco, but like 3 stories high of a giant parking structure, which would be infeasible from a financial perspective to construct, and probably have the largest building in Morgan Hill sitting right at the corporation site, taking up all the ground. So we kind of didn't move forward with that scenario. It wasn't a real feasible scenario to do on site. So what we ended up really was 2 kind of scenarios that really worked out and that could work out. And the first one, scenario 4, is a look at the needs for a future site. So this is what a combined site on future property could look like. And you see kind of the shared administrative buildings, those sort of things. You see that the city is primarily located in the red spaces and the school district in the green spaces. So that is one option. And when we looked at that option, really you get the total cost scenario there. It's a big cost of with the land acquisition and everything, of estimated like close to $68 million to do that between the city and the school district. So the other scenario we looked at was a scenario that kept us on site but didn't consolidate the school district functions. It just kept the transportation functions and the city future needs functions. So basically looked at the growth and the needs for the future of those 2 things and kind of said, can we do the exact same things we're doing now but grow into the future, which in turn could potentially offer the opportunity for the to separate the property and the school district to purchase if that was something that was still desired. So this is a scenario that kind of looks like this. So this is the existing Corporation Yard site. And we did some things. We basically, instead of having the roadway come in at Eads Court and gates on both sides, we could reclaim that kind of shared space by putting the gate earlier. That's right up in this area, so you wouldn't have a gate coming through. And then we could look at something that would help us down the road is one of the big issues we have is parking for our staff that come to use the site. But there may be an opportunity to share parking with the park. And the reason for that is typically weekdays, school year, when most people are working are the time that the parking is least used. So that we looked at that as an opportunity. So using all this space on the existing site, even with the school district's future needs and the city's future needs, it would be possible to fit on the existing site down the road for our needs for the next 20, 30 years. So we could move forward, have the same functions and continue to move forward on our site. As you've kind of seen here, they did the layout together, so we weren't trying to separate the property in this function, but you'll see the Morgan Hill Unified needs in green and the city in red. And kind of just how the space layout goes, we would kind of shift some of the needs from the city side back over to the south over here, and the school district to the north. And this would be a possibility. We'd have shared administrative kind of space in here that we would use. One of the findings that we found out, as we looked at sharing the space, one of the things we hoped to achieve was we'd need less space if we co-located things like break rooms and office space and all those things. But as the consultant got into those functions, we saved out almost a minimal amount of space because there's just different needs for different functions. Like the locker room needs for the wastewater team are probably a little bit different than the locker room needs for the bus drivers, right? So they aren't always compatible. So as we looked at that, we didn't see a huge amount of space savings by combining the functions, but obviously shared driveways, the shared fuel systems, all those things would be space savings, and some of that we do now already. So this option, it would be quite a bit cheaper down the road. It looks the option ends up being approximately 43 million is the cost estimate. So obviously cheaper because we're not building from scratch. The other thing that would be possible in this recommended scenario, it doesn't have to have a build out like right away. We could put together kind of a transition plan that works us towards that without funding complete replacement or knocking down all the buildings and building new things. So it's something that could be reasonably worked towards without a huge capital investment to start. It can be something that can be worked towards over the future years if we know how the space is to be divided. So the next steps we've talked about at the staff level with the city and the district staff is really continuing to work forward on this, but looking at design and phasing of the implementation, like I talked about, to say what things could happen first to keep moving this forward. And analyze the parking impacts at a much higher level of community park to see how that would impact the park and the use space there. And then develop a recommendation on potential future sale of a portion of the property to Morgan Hill Unified School District, if that's still desired, and then develop the funding plan for the phase development. And with that, I will stop my presentation and ask Kirsten or Anessa if they have anything they'd like to add.
I don't, Chris. I think that was very comprehensive of what we've talked about as a team.
Vanessa, anything else to add?
No, I agree. We've been on this for a while, so I think he covered all of our needs.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I don't. Oh, Mr. Horner.
Everybody knew I'd have some questions, right? First, thank you very much, and for all the joint work. And just by commentary, I really appreciate the spirit of cooperation and collaboration and finding both construction and operating efficiencies by working together. That does my heart good in all ways, but including as a taxpayer. As taxpayers, we pay for everything, and it's nice to see various entities really looking at how to cooperate and make the best use of our funds. And also, I really like looking at the shared use of parking, in other contexts. It was many years ago, I went to a conference and learned that in this country, we have 3 parking spaces for every vehicle. We have over 300 million vehicles in the United States and about 1 billion parking spaces that are paved. So, and often that's because things are looked at in isolation rather than in combination. So, Mr. Ghioni's comment, like, the park's heaviest use is at night and our employees' heaviest use is during the day. Let's make those spots do double duty. I really want to compliment everybody on that work and support it. We had talked about, little space savings opportunity as far as costs there. So I understand that. I'm wondering if you can address any operating cost savings, from joint use of some of these things. I understand many of the needs are unique perhaps, but still, 1 AC unit versus 2 and those sort of things. Was there an opportunity to analyze operating cost efficiencies, or was that not really covered yet?
It wasn't covered completely at any detail level, just our own assumptions, which obviously is the same assumption you just made. If we can share spaces, we would, because that would help us. But we have not. The scope didn't include a big like forecast of electrical costs and those sort of things.
And we're a little bit different, and I don't know if the city is the same way, because we're in contract, and so we lock down certain prices. And so that would be a whole separate conversation if we do it jointly with just this site, because we have a contract with Spur right now for gas, and then we have a contract with Direct Energy for electric, which we lock in certain costs. So that would be something that we have to look into. So yeah, that wasn't even in the conversations.
And how long are those contracts typically?
Right now, Direct Energy, I think, is on 2 years. So I think we have, I want to say 2021, but I'm not 100% for sure on that one. And then I believe Spur is ending at the end of the year. So I'll have to double check that one.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is a long-term kind of vision and a long-term plan. So I understand those weren't analyzed yet, but there's opportunities, and maybe the city finds a better supplier for diesel than the school, or vice versa, and then everybody can share whatever the benefits are. So hopefully there's some economy of scale there. And then I know in the distant past, well before any of us were involved, the city and school once operated a joint vehicle maintenance facility on that site, where both school buses and everyone's vehicles were maintained there. And I believe over time that kind of bifurcated, where now our school district is doing maintenance there, but the city gets most of its vehicle maintenance elsewhere. I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's just my understanding of the history. And I know, well, up until COVID, finding qualified diesel mechanics was a challenge for our district just in operation. So it's not, but has that been thought about or comprehended? Is that something that if we have a joint vehicle kind of facility going forward, you're re-looking at some potential joint operations around vehicle maintenance? Or did what we learned from the past say, no, leaving those separate actually works better? Huh? So that's the question without presuming the answer.
I could start, and I think teammates can jump in, but so we at the city are very open to that opportunity of continuing to work with Morgan Hill Unified. I think there was resource constraints for the district as far as finding and being able to take on our fleet. Actually, the district maintained, not before our time, actually did maintain much of the city's fleet during my time here. So so it hasn't been that long ago. So we're open to that right now. we at the Corporation Yard and the rest of the city are kind of partnering with our police department, who's done vehicle maintenance, and we have an RFP going out for our small vehicle maintenance, but we are still actually struggling to find a partner to manage our large vehicle maintenance. So we're very much looking at that. We've looked at partnering with the county, City of Gilroy, others. So we're still open to that, solving that puzzle on our end.
Great. Thank you for correcting my faulty memory. I appreciate it. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Horner. Member Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor Constantine. So my question is, I understand now, so the proposed plan is to only keep transportation at the existing site. So I was just wondering how this will impact the district's other functions like maintenance, grounds, facilities moving forward. Like are all those housed at the DO right now? Or do we have any other locations? And then will those need to kind of expand in time to where we have to find another location for any of those functions?
Yeah, so the district's maintenance department is housed here at the district office, kind of the back half of the district office, where the warehouses are, is like the wood shop, working room, and the key room, and all those larger spaces that we wanted to transition to one site. Grounds is located on the back end of Britton Middle School. And so I think it's a little bit hard for efficiencies because those departments share equipment and resources. And so many times it's less efficient because they're supervised by one director who then has to go between two different sites. And for employees who need to get equipment and materials, they're also traveling as well. So long-term, ideally, operations would be all located on one site. Given the district's future needs for space, that may not be possible within our existing facilities. So we would have to look at potentially down the road a separate facility that would be a combination for those two departments, or maybe repurposing some of our existing spaces. We have a lot of space, for example, at San Martin Gwin or Sobrato. Could we use some of those spaces to co-house those two departments together would be a question, but it would definitely require capital investment by the district.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Chris, in your report, the option 4, it was like your number was 67 million. I didn't see that in the report. Is there somewhere in there that I didn't see that? Because the option 4 in this one, in the report was 51 million.
Let me take a quick look.
And I didn't see the slide that you presented wasn't presented like that in the report that I have. So unless I don't have
it. I think there were a few things we kind of put together. Let me pull that up so I can just double check.
You have to remember that the report also is for land within the city of Morgan Hill. So even though we encompass Santa Clara County. So just to remember that part. So when looking at land, we're looking at city of Morgan Hill land. And so land prices obviously have increased since the report has come out.
Okay, so what your presentation is more updated than what the report is, because I didn't get the presentation either. I don't know if anybody else has.
It came out yesterday.
Yeah, the presentation was emailed out.
Yeah, I got the okay, so I didn't get that. So that's why I'm seeing different numbers. And of course, I'll just say it right now. The spreadsheets that were in the report, I could not make heads or tails out of them.
They're very confusing.
So confusing.
That's why we tried to summarize. And I know it's a big, long, lengthy report. A lot of it is background info on what we can use for some of the smaller scale changes.
Right.
So I do apologize for that.
No, that's okay. The other question that I had was that the report touched briefly on the fact that we're expanding. I was concerned that if whatever option that we choose, how much time would that give us? In other words, would we be able to stay there for 10, 20 years? If this is something that's going to be an option for just maybe 5 years, and that we may not even be looking at any of these options. So was there any kind of thought or by the consultant on how long we could survive on that space with any of the options?
And I'll say for the city's end, we talked through 2035 and like what our expansion looks like. So so that was what we had them look at. So we weren't, yeah. So we're not talking 5 years. We're talking 15, 20 plus years.
Well, how long would this, if we said to them tomorrow that we could start this, I mean, how long would it take to construct this? Because I would imagine it would take a couple of years.
Yeah, so it'll take a couple years. So, and then we have to develop the funding mechanism to fund it. So
So we're not talking a full 15 or 20 years. We're talking maybe less. If we went 2035, we'd definitely less than 15 years then.
No, and we can look at that for a longer piece. I think I'm confident based on, where our city growth is going to happen and what's going to happen with our infrastructure, because we're building in, not building out, and I don't see that trend necessarily changing. So that doesn't necessitate like the size of our water and wastewater groups like doubling, and that's a major portion for the city. So and we also have to remember there's other things we can do on site. Like we said, we can start to go up. So if we become a city of 120,000 people at some time, we're going to have to look at going up if we want to maintain that courtyard site.
Hopefully I won't be around and I mean alive. Hopefully it's going to be way into the future.
Right.
That scenario happens. What about the school district? With just the transportation portion being there, would this site would it be a long-term site for the school district as well?
It would be. We had our transportation director do an analysis of the number of buses over the previous 10 years compared to where we were now. And we don't see that number growing beyond what we are now. And actually in the proposed areas, we've talked about potentially dividing the site. The district would gain about a half of an acre, which would help, not necessarily with future expansion of our transportation fleet, but thinking about our fleet maybe going green and needing to add additional facilities on site to handle things like that. So that additional half acre that we've talked about would facilitate those changes for the next 15 to 20 years.
Okay, thank you. Bless you, Vanessa. You're on mute, but we saw you sneeze.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to jump back to your first question. So sorry, I was having trouble pulling up, but page 65 in the report matches the presentation, and that was the outline of the cost. There are some other numbers that are shown previously in the report, but it doesn't include all the costs like environmental work and other things that go with it, some of the soft costs. So that might be the delta that you're seeing from other areas in the report.
Okay, well, all right. I'll have to look at that because the 65 doesn't match the same number.
Sorry, yeah, 68.
Okay, there it goes.
68.
Yeah, now that has a summary page. That one, okay. Yeah, there it is. All right, thank you. Council Member Martinez Beltran.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the work that you've all done. I don't know, haven't had a chance to meet all of you, but this is really fantastic where we can, work together and try and face the challenges that are facing us with our limited budgets all around. Some of the questions that I have is, one, the savings in the contingency project fund, Chris, it's, 6.9 versus the 6.1 versus the 3.9 million. Can you speak to that difference a little bit? I'm looking and trying to figure out, is that just from the 75,000 square feet, or where is that?
The contingency is typically based on a percentage, usually 10% of the construction costs. So that's what it's based on. So just because the one is a larger cost, it's going to have a higher contingency because you're building more. It's typically kind of how we do it with capital projects.
Okay, so it wasn't specific to anything here. And then
yeah,
as far as the parking, I love seeing the analysis there because I agree we do need to always maximize our parking, but I would be interested. I mean, there's limited parking there, if I'm thinking correctly, right across from where the playground is, and being that that's going to be changing. So that's something that I want to make sure, that we're thinking about, because kids and elderly and all of that, I want to make sure that we've got that priority parking for the park as well.
Yeah, that's why it's identified as the next step.
Yeah, and that's perfect. I'm just reinforcing that's fantastic. The other question that I wanted to ask was just, going and looking at the transportation grounds and facility maintenance, will there be a need for those to be at some point kind of synergized together? I mean, is that something that will be a priority in the future for the school district? The reason I'm looking at that is because of the two, obviously the grounds and the facility maintenance isn't included on that, on the suggested option.
Ideally, I guess I'll start. Ideally, we would like to have all three together in one facility. Should it end up being just grounds and maintenance, that's something that we can do. And we have some property like Britain, for instance, because we've built a new Britain kind of on the east side. So we do have some facilities available. So we could potentially move maintenance and grounds together in one facility, especially with the Santa Clara Valley Water District undergrounding their pipeline. We could potentially have a driveway. So we have a lot of ideas out there. We just don't have them in concrete just yet. But it's not going to work on that facility, and unless we purchase a large parcel that's going to be available for the transportation department to be able to exit. That's been the problem. We have to remember we have large buses. And so for them to get out on the highway or Monterey or Butterfield, we have to be aware of where we're trying to purchase a facility to be able to house everybody. So right now we're good. Should we like everybody together? I think Kirsten's the same way. Yes, we would. Just right now with the price of property, I don't know that we see that in our near future.
Okay, great. That's great. That's what I want to know. Just to the mayor's point, I think it's, looking at the horizon of investing this, how long that's going to take us out. That was the whole purpose behind my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember. Member Horner.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So my sense of what, as our individual bodies, and then all here together, my sense from the joint staffs is what we're being asked is not to commit to anything right now, but it's like, okay, here's our basic recommendation. Are people good with us investing in time to go to the next phase of work to flesh that out? Is that a kind of a fair paraphrase of what you're looking for from both organizations and staff right now?
I think that's fair, John. I think.
Okay. Yeah. So certainly, just from my point of view, I certainly support moving forward, with your recommendation. And I'd also ask that as we think about that, particularly since this is focused on transportation, our duties for environmental responsibility are very much front and center. And we're all freaked out about COVID right now, but let's not forget the fires and climate change and everything else, which are also, mass events that we don't control, but we are part of. So, and also as you're looking at funding streams and transportation, certainly between now and 2035 may evolve quite dramatically. So, one is, we have to think about that in any design, and two, maybe there are some unique funding opportunities if we're, out on the, on the not the bleeding, but hopefully the leading edge of some of that, maybe there's some. And I know both staffs are experts at looking for grant funding, so you're probably way ahead of me. I'm probably stating a duh from your point of view, but we haven't really talked about that. And certainly environmental stewardship, cost efficiency, and all that in the context of a joint transportation facility, just something I wanted to highlight. Maybe you can respond to.
Before we move forward, Member Sullivan has another question.
Thank you. And I was remiss in my first attempt at asking a question, and just taking the time to thank you all. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Definitely gave me a much better understanding and provided even more context around this entire issue and some of the challenges that we face. So thank you for that great presentation and all of the information. I may be kind of idealistic and naive and even throwing this out there. But you know, if we recognize that scenario 4 is the ideal situation, you know, in a perfect world, and would take care of our needs, all of the needs in terms of combining all of our different functions for efficiencies and being able to kind of be sustainable and take us out farther into the future. Do you think there's any sort of possibility of, you know, obviously we'd be pulling the financial resources that we could, but even if the city and the district were to try to go out together for proposing maybe like a joint bond or something to kind of maybe help us achieve scenario 4 in the future? I mean, I don't know how much farther that kind of pushes the timeline. And I'll admit I'm a little bit gun shy going out for a bond, just coming off of Measure I, but you know, I definitely can see the great benefits of scenario 4. And I know that the scenario 3B is being recommended obviously for fiscal reasons. So I don't know, just throwing it out there. I don't know if that was ever discussed or considered. Again, just kind of putting it out there, and I don't know if that would ever be a possibility.
I mean,
Well, and I think some of the history on how the courtyard was originally developed was the city owned the property, and the city and school districts jointly did sell bonds to develop the courtyard. And this was, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s. So there is a history of going out jointly to our voters and having that be authorized. So it's something we could always consider from both entities if that was a mutual desire.
I just add, I think it'd be a policy question for the city council to weigh in on, based on priorities. If we're asking for funding, would this be a top priority when we're struggling? But I think the opportunity to partner with the district would help incentivize that. But I think it's a policy decision for our council because there's many other needs across the city.
Very true. Very true. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I had one more question. The scenarios also talked about taking the parking from the park. How would that affect the parking for people who want to actually go to community park?
Yeah,
Those are quite a bit of. Those are a lot of spaces that it would take up.
Yeah, good question, and I should have clarified that better. So we wouldn't take the spaces, but what is needed is employee parking during the workday. So what we would analyze is the timing of the use of the park parking versus the timing of the use of the employee parking, which for many of us is early in the morning weekdays, and then they're gone by the afternoon. So it might be our analysis is going to look at that scenario to say, hey, does that timing work out where, you know, there's 50 employees parked in that parking lot, takes up 50 spaces, but it doesn't take it up during the peak times of use for the park. So it doesn't matter. So like right now, if you go there, even before COVID, you go there during the week at 3 o'clock and there's probably 10 people in the parking that has 200 spaces. So our analysis is going to look at that, but it wouldn't take away parking from that perspective from the park, but it would take it away during certain times when employees are there.
Got it. Okay, because the report made it sound like we would be using the park or the parking lot spaces for, you know, the expansion of the courtyard. So thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I mean, one other opportunity, if it doesn't work out, is to figure out how to add more parking, and that might be a benefit to the courtyard and the park. You know,
Right.
So we'd look at that too.
Okay. Member Horn, did you have another question, or did you not put your hand down?
No, I do. Just very briefly, I want to say Trustee Sullivan's suggestion is fascinating. I don't know, you know, feasibility is another question, but I just wanted to kind of ditto being intrigued with that possibility if it's workable.
Okay, great, thank you. So with that, I will ask my colleagues if we're Councilmember Martinez Beltran.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just wanted, you know, hearing the suggestion from President Sullivan and I don't want, it sounds like this committee has put an immense amount of time and resources into this already. But I would like to see, could maybe we look and see if we're looking, I'm thinking long-term, if there are any additional benefits that we could, as a city, gain from looking at option, I think it's 4. Could we take a moment and look at that, see if that's something that we may want to talk about with with the rest of the council? But if there aren't, perhaps, I mean, the reason that I would consider that is if we're looking to go out for bonds, then necessarily it wouldn't have to come from, our general fund, funding wise. Chris, I guess I'm asking if you've, have you had any preliminary looks at what we might be able to do on top of what option 4 is?
Yeah, no, I think for us at the city, option 4 is pretty unique, and there's some other actual different funding opportunities that the city could have. One is selling the existing property. If we're moving to another site, the city would be able to sell that property to use those funds to put towards it. The other thing, which would be our intention to do, based on this, and I think it was outlined in my staff report that went to council, is looking when we come back and update our water and wastewater master plans, as well as look at our public facility impact fees. Those 3 things have not included this expansion, but as we go forward, we're going to start looking at those potentially adding those to the impact fees so that we could start collecting impact fees, and we could potentially borrow and pay back with impact fees. There's lots of opportunity scenarios, and that could be combined with the bonding. So there's just a lot of financing scenarios that would be part of the next steps that we're looking at taking with you that we do from the city side. So yeah, so we're looking at all those options.
Okay. So option 4 is not off, it's just not the leading option.
It's not off. And I think for us at the city, and I just, we have the space to build out for our needs. We want to partner with Morgan Hill Unified. So I think it's a policy decision for the school district on if they really need all those things together and they're able to fund, because if they say we'd like to go in on a new site, I think it'll be easier for the city to join them on that. If that's what we want to do, because we have the property we can sell to help fund that. But I think it's a tougher decision for the school district, in my perspective. Don't mean to speak for them, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I will ask if there's anyone who disagrees with Member Horner's recommendation that we should move forward with this. Seeing no one, then we'll let staff know that we want to go forward. So thank you very much for the presentation. It was this is not an easy not an easy thing. This is going to be difficult, but really appreciate all the hard work. So now we'll move on to the city of Morgan. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I will ask any members of the public wishing to address us on this item. Again, if you're on the phone and you wish to raise your hand, just hit *9. And that way we'll know if you want to address us. So not seeing any blue hands going up from the members of the public, then we'll go ahead and move on to the City of Morgan Hill City update.
Okay, so I am going to ask Chief Palsgrove to share some information about some of our stats. And we do have a presentation for this item. It has not yet been provided to this committee or to the public. And so we will supplement this presentation along with the presentation that Chris gave. With that, Chief.
Thank you, Christina. Well, one thing about COVID is it's greatly decreased the number of citations juveniles have received during this time. So with that, I'll get started with the SRO report. Greg Deaney is one of our school resource officers, and he's done some welfare checks regarding statements heard over Zoom class, and none of those resulted in any kind of case or investigation or citations. There have been 2 assaults reported to him, but they were old, months old. And he's also provided some information on evictions. As far as Sean Farrell, who's employed by the tobacco grant, he's conducted some welfare checks as well on statements heard over Zoom class. He's taken a call or calls from Martin Murphy regarding welfare checks, and he's received some phone calls from the schools with miscellaneous questions. So that's what they've been doing over the past month. Taking a look at the juvenile arrests from March when COVID started to today and comparing that to last year, we see that there are 31 arrests. It's important to note that we use arrests the same as we do citations. So juveniles are given juvenile contact reports, which are equivalent to like a ticket that somebody would get for speeding. And so these are just citations. It doesn't mean that they were arrested in handcuffs and brought to jail. It just means that they were given a ticket in essence. So that's good. 115 in 2019 down to 31 this year. If you take a look at the number of citations issued this year, starting in March when COVID kicked off, you see the trend of 2, less than a handful every month, sometimes 1. We were also taking a look at the mental health calls for service. And if you look at this year, it's trending about the same as it did last year. This year, while the percentage is higher, the total number of calls for mental health for juveniles and adults are down from this time last year, which is a bit surprising if you consider that people are stuck in the house just confined more. So that's good news. If you take a look at this is just the breakdown of the number of citations given this year, and most of them are fairly significant offenses. But again, the way the juvenile justice system handles youth crime, usually the result is a letter, a class. And it's also important for me to mention that we are working on a juvenile diversion program, and we're making some great progress forward. So hopefully in the near future, within a couple months, we will have a program in place to divert juveniles that otherwise would be contacted by a probation officer. We'll be going through some local programming in South County in partnership with some community-based organizations in district attorney's office, public defender's office, probation, and others. This was the breakdown from 2019. As you can see, there were a lot more cases. And I'll conclude with making everybody aware, if you're not already, which I believe you are, that WAVE is holding an event on January 15th from 6 p.m. to 7. On the left-hand side, you'll see in blue, on the blue flyer, that WAVE is Warriors Against Vaping and E-Cigarettes. That is funded by our tobacco grant. It's a youth initiative to bring awareness of the harms vaping brings to our youth. And that event is for ages 13 through 19, and there'll be some contests and prizes. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. I'll ask my colleagues if there's any questions. Member Sullivan. Oh, and Anessa has a question as well. So we'll go with Member Sullivan and Anessa.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Palsgrove, for that presentation and for the update. It was, it's good to kind of see where we're at to date, especially given, as you said, the challenges that we've had for these past 9 months. I guess this is not necessarily a question, but maybe more of don't even want to say a request, but a suggestion. I know that some of your slides refer to the word, you use the word arrests, but you clarified for us that that doesn't necessarily mean that a child is detained and handcuffed and, you know, booked into county jail or juvenile hall. But for the lay person, they're not going to know that. You know, and even when I first saw your slide, I didn't assume that it was just citation and release or a contact. So do you think for the future, when we're talking about these types of contacts with juvenile and we're reporting the data, can we change that word and not use the word arrest, but maybe citations, as you had mentioned? You know, I don't know if it's something in your database where it's automatic and you kind of have to do it, but I will say that if this information is put out to the public and, you know, people are seeing it, they're gonna, you know, the word arrest, you automatically think one thing. And, you know, even though, like you said, the contact is not nearly as severe as something like that. So I think it would be helpful just for the community to understand that we're not talking about kids being in handcuffs, that these are citations or less. So just kind of a suggestion on my part in terms of perception and understanding.
Yes, your point's well taken. It is a software issue that I will look into. I was thinking about that as I was putting it together. I will absolutely look into that. I felt that it was still better to share it though, for transparency's sake. But yeah, it's an important distinction between the two. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
And that was a concern that I had too. So thank you, Wendy, for taking that, because I was going to mention that as well. We're not trying to hide it by making it a less of a word, saying, oh, we don't want to say arrest, but it's actually to be more transparent because it's going to be more accurate. So that, yeah, so we can look into that. And if it's not part of the software, maybe for the presentation, we can change it, make sure, again, not to hide anything, but to just be more accurate. Ms. Espinosa, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, just so I have you here, I just wanted to let you know, I know we've had some issues over at El Toro Elementary School. We have a lot of kids that like to jump on the roof and have social gatherings up there. We've eliminated the availability for them to actually get inside the classrooms. And most recently, we've had them break, or we don't know who has broken into some of the storage containers. So I was hoping just over the break, maybe a couple more drive-bys for El Toro. And then specifically Britain Middle School, we've had boulders gone through the new windows along Monterey Road, fairly large. So we're thinking slingshots or something. It's not a drive-by. We weren't sure what they were. We've already put a police report, but just the break especially, we're just hoping for just a couple more drive-bys down those areas.
Absolutely. I've made note of that. I'll send it out to the department.
Truly appreciate you sharing that, and just encourage you to just constant communication with us. You know, you don't have to wait for this meeting, you know, especially since we only meet every other month. We're here to help and partner with you guys.
Yeah, no, we've called it in, but I just felt like, just so everybody is aware of what's going on. We just have two campuses of just odd that are getting lately.
Idle hands. Thank you very much. Okay, Councilmember Martinez Belcher.
Thanks so much, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Espinosa, for that as well. And thank you, Chief, for your great report. I really appreciated that. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that there wasn't quite the difference with the mental health, but with the decrease in arrests, I just wanted to know if there was any guess on why that decrease. I was surprised to hear that.
I don't have a quick answer for you.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll look into it and get back to you though.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Member Horner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and thank you, Chief Pelsgrove. Excellent report. And my question is sort of similar to Member Martinez Beltran's, that I mean, those numbers are dramatic, as you yourself highlighted. I was particularly surprised by the reduced number of calls for mental health related issues. And I don't know if it's answerable, but the question it raises for me is, were fewer bad things happening, or because of different circumstances, was it just less reported, less covered, and less brought to the attention of our police department? So, I mean, if there's fewer arrests and fewer mental health calls because there's less trouble, that's wonderful. And maybe you have no way to tell. I might be asking an unfair question. I don't know if you have any sense, you know, or vandalism or other things. Are fewer bad things happening, or just because of the different social circumstance, or are there just fewer opportunities for it to be reported to your team for action?
Yeah, so in response to both of your questions, what I think I'll do is go back and separate out take a look at what's happening out in the public versus what's happening in the schools. Right now, we are down 10 police officer positions. We have 6 vacancies and 4 people out for other reasons. And so with COVID and less officers on the streets, that could be a significant reason for the decrease. People are being confined more. There's not as much things to do. And so I think that also has a direct correlation with why things are either reported less or less crime occurring. And so we are seeing increases in certain types of crimes like stolen vehicles. And we know that stolen vehicles are used in other crimes like burglaries, robberies, et cetera. So there's definitely a reason for the trend. But to give you specific details, we'll have to dive into that a little bit more. Right now, we're trying to stay afloat with just keeping officers healthy on the street. So in addition to those 10 officers that are out, we do have periods of time where there's another handful of officers out because of COVID exposures or so we are running thin right now. I think that's important to recognize, and diving into some of these things just isn't feasible right now because everybody's running ragged.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just to be clear, I don't want my questions in any way to create a distraction from doing what you and your team see as your most urgent work with the people you have. So that's greatly appreciated. And, you know, whatever you can tell us about these things is great. But if that takes away from doing your first priority jobs, I fully understand it. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And we'll look into it. Thanks.
Chief, that triggered a question for me. The stats that you gave on citations / arrests, were those just on school property, or was that citywide?
That was citywide.
Okay, because I was assuming that because we were talking about SROs, that the citations and arrests were for just on school grounds. So we're talking citywide. Okay.
And thank you. And I'll make a better clarification in next meeting's report.
Okay, no problem. You started talking about SROs, and I always assumed that it was just on school property when those were happening. So I didn't realize it was always on citywide. So that's good clarification for me. All right, before we move forward, I'll ask if there's any members of the public wishing to address us on this item. Seeing no blue hands going up, then we'll go ahead and move over to the school district's update.
Thank you, Mayor Constantine. I have to agree with Captain Palsgrove in that it's hard to identify the circumstances of what we're in right now compared to last year. Really caused so many changes. And so it's like any research, if you look for what the causes are, you have to isolate for variables, and there's so many variables in what we do today in our community, in our society, with schools, with policing, with everything that we're doing, that it's hard to really attribute the changes to anything right now. And I was listening to New York Mayor de Blasio do an announcement to all his community and to the school system. Everybody was very disappointed because he went on to announce, like he does every year, and basically he announced the conditions of the weather and the snow, and everybody needs to stay inside. In any other year, he would be canceling school and they would be having snow days. But they're not doing that. They're all going to be in their houses, in their homes, still in school. So disappointed the entire city of all those children. Very different times that we are in right now. You know, the question about the mental, social emotional issues and calls for assistance with kids that are having episodes and such. You know, there are lots of resources now as well. So there's parents have many resources. We showed last night in the LADE presentation that we have a website where parents can go to and get some assistance. I know that the city has pushed out assistance as well as all our community groups, Community Solutions and Discovery Counseling. And so people are very attentive to where the kids are. It doesn't mean that things are better. As a matter of fact, there's probably more episodes happening, but it may be one of the variables is that we have more resources and we're better educating parents on how to get assistance for their kids. So I just wanted to ask Kirsten if you want to add anything now. We have lots to report on, but I don't want to overlay what many of you have already heard in our board reports or last night. We do have our in-person programs, 3 in-person programs continuing on, where we have probably close to 600 kids coming into the schools, either for internet connectivity. So we're helping with that. We have pushed out hotspots to families. We have increasing small groups coming in for kids that have failed. Just a point of information, Los Angeles Unified School District decided that they were going to give no F grades for this semester. So they made that announcement. And I haven't heard other districts following suit at this point. But they decided that there's so many, it's such a critical issue for them, and that kids are so struggling in getting connected with the schools and getting help for their assignments. We are noticing increase in number of Fs for students, but we're also, we find a unique circumstance that even though kids our scores in our sampling for math are dropping in comparison to prior years. And that also aligns with what's going on around the state, by the way, and the country with math scores dropping. Our scores in reading are going up compared to prior years. So again, you know, what's the variables there that are making a difference, and what can we do with math to fix those variables? And those are all questions that we need to ask. So I'll turn it over. Maybe I can start with Deputy Superintendent if you wanted to speak to this. Deputy Superintendent and Chief Financial Officer Kirsten Perez to just give a brief update. You could hit the food thing going on too.
Yeah, so today, and Superintendent Batata was out there this morning, we have our last food program giveaway right before the break. So usually we provide food every Monday to families in the community. But because of the holiday break, we're doing that this Friday, 2 weeks. That includes something special, pork tenderloin, with recipes from our staff about how to cook that. So that was something different that we did for the holiday, in addition to the food that they normally receive from the department. And one other strategic update is that we're going through a new local control accountability program update, which is a 3-year cycle where we update the district's goals as well as actions that lead us to those goals, and then align it lastly to our budget. So when we come back from break, we'll begin the planning portion of that, and it will culminate over the next 6 months. And then the board will ultimately adopt a new plan in June. So we're looking forward to getting started on that in the new year.
Great, thank you. And the kids are on break as of today, after today. So, Assistant Superintendent Pilar Vasquez Villalba, if you have an update.
Be short and sweet. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Happy holidays. We continue to look at our programs and what potentially second semester will look like. We are going to continue to support our teachers and our site administrators and support staff on scaling our pilot, small group, and connectivity hubs at, I want to say most of our school sites, if not 99%, at least 90% of our schools will be able to offer 1, 2, or 3 of those models. And so really that's what we're working on. What is this going to look like? As an executive cabinet, we look at the proposals. And so we're excited about that, having a lot of conversations with principals and teachers on what that could look like mid-January, because that's when we're going to start looking at programs again. So exciting stuff.
Great. And I wanted to mention about the pilots. As most of you know, we started with the essential childcare back in the spring of last year, where we knew that the first responders and healthcare workers needed a place for their kids. And so using the Department of Health protocols and the support of different agencies, we developed the childcare program. And then that really helped us in preparing for the pilot programs that we have and the hubs and the small groups in making sure that what we were doing was actually still right when it came to the health protocols and orders. And we just had a report that although, as is happening everywhere, there are many adults that are getting exposed or testing positive, and it's escalated to unprecedented, that word, amounts even now. And that for children, it hasn't been a widespread condition. And the research as we follow it are showing that the children are less likely to actually carry the virus and by way of not contracting the virus as easily as adults for whatever those reasons are. So we were very fortunate, even though that with our employees, I can't remember the exact number, but it was less than 50 total employees positive case. None of them, according to our tracking and the public health, were got exposed or were contracted with the virus while in the workplace. At the same time, only 2 positive cases of our students were found, and neither of those contracted the virus in our schools. They got it from a family member when they traced it. So we're not, those numbers and the stats aren't easily accessible to us. We have to get that through our lead, who is connected with public health, that does have access to all that confidential information of who, where, what, and when. And that is Noelle Weeks. And so we ask her every once in a while about the conditions. Now, because nobody's contracted it in our programs, doesn't mean that we don't quarantine those programs. When somebody has contracted it and it's known and they report it, then whatever cohort or bubble that they were in, whether it's a workplace bubble or a classroom bubble, we quarantine the workplace bubble or the classroom bubble for 14 days. Now it'll be 10 because those conditions have changed. And so our protocols are working, at least showing that there hasn't been an outbreak of, and an outbreak is basically identified as 3 or more. We haven't even had a single case traced to a tracking of exposure from one person to another in the workplace. So we're very proud of that, and we're hoping, we know it may change, but we're hoping that it doesn't. that is about it. We are open to questions. And I don't see Fawn on here, but let me just say that let me share my screen if I can. This is this morning. Let's see if it works. This is, I don't know if you could see that. This is this morning's food service group, and they're all holding those pork loins. They were there, 4 in the morning, setting up and preparing, and then handing out all the food. I've got lots of, you see, there's just boxes and boxes. These buildings back here are full of the meals, and these are our incredible heroes, food service workers. They did get a community cares PBIS, positive based behavioral interventions and supports recognition from the Santa Clara County Office of Education. They got a big banner. So they have, 20,000 meals a week is what the rate is now. And this morning, who knows, but it was amazing to be over there and watch them. They're so happy and proud, and they put themselves out there every week. And yeah, they're the ones up at 3 to get to work at 4 to prepare the food.
Thank you, Superintendent, for showing that picture. And I know we talked about it earlier when we were going through this in COVID and how many meals are being put out, but it bears repeating because that's amazing work, amazing work. So thank you for sharing that again, and I'll make sure to make mention of that because I think we forget all the work that's being done for all of us in the background. So thank you for that. I will look to my colleagues for any questions. Mr. Horner.
Mr. Mayor, and just want to thank Morgan Hill Unified staff on the things that have been reported on. The creativity and going beyond and flexibility that everyone has shown going through this crisis is really exemplary. And the work I've been doing on the Legislative Action Committee for the County School Boards Association, we have a little subcommittee talking about food insecurity and who can do what. And I can tell from my perception there, I'm always so proud to get to share the work of others. And I'm very clear it's not my work, it's the work you all are doing. But it really is, you really demonstrated leadership throughout the region in this area, particularly of meeting students' food needs, and in a way that is encouraging others to do the same. So you're not only making a huge difference for the youth of our community, but that word, kind of a positive idea virus, if you will, getting out of others saying, well, if they can do it, so can we. So just want to highlight that again and give my deepest appreciation and compliments for all that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez-Beltran.
Thank you, Mayor. I've always wondered growing up in here why this place was so special and how kids like me and others succeeded. And it's because this community is just stellar in everything that we do and the effort. And Steve, I really want to thank you and your team for the leadership that you've shown. I don't think the layperson knows how intense. This was my second year being on council, how intense COVID has been on everyone. And you guys have really just stepped up to the plate. And I really want to thank you as, I think first and foremost as a mother, but also as your council member and a community member and everything else. It's really fantastic to see what all of you are doing to bring this together. And that food, I mean, the dedication to do that over and over, the pivoting, trying it one way, figuring that doesn't work, going back, doing it weekly now, and just the reach that you've had. So many people have told me that they are using it and that it works for them. And that's because you guys are so committed to it. So thank you. Thank you for all of that.
I do have the perfect recipe for the pork loin. I could send you all too. The food service workers put it in all the packages so that they could have a great Christmas dinner.
Oh, I love it.
Great, thank you. Now look to members of the public wishing to address us on this item. And not seeing any blue hands going up. Then I will go ahead and ask if there are any other reports or updates.
I have just two items that I wanted to mention. The county is hosting a ambassador program starting tomorrow. And so we were asked to identify community members, anywhere between 50 to 100, that we would send basically through this program in Morgan Hill. And we have much more than 50 to 100 names that we've sent that out to. And so these are ambassadors that are going to be educated on COVID-19, on messaging and how do we reach community, because South County has, our numbers are staggering and way out of proportion with the rest of the county. And so if you are interested or know somebody that would be interested as serving as an ambassador, learning more and being able to educate their circles, please send me the names. Don't assume that we have those names already. But it starts tomorrow. I could forward the Zoom, and somebody just needs to register. It's from 11 to 1:30. And I'm sure if people can't make tomorrow, there'll be future sessions. And then the other thing I wanted to follow up with last night on the session, Heather Geddes at the library, along with our recreation team, worked on a kind of a front and back flyer, e-flyer basically, that has activities to do over the holiday break. And, everything from, getting in your car and looking at lights to, going to the county parks, city parks. And so we'll include that in our weekly 411. It's nice because there's not a whole lot to do over the holidays. And so we try to identify different activities. And that concludes my remarks.
Great, thank you very much. Not seeing anybody else unmuting, then I will ask if there are any topics for future meetings. All right. And then before I adjourn, I'm going to ask one more time if there's any members of the public wishing to address us on anything. Again, if you're on your phone, you hit *9 and that will raise your hand. If not, our next meeting will be February 9th. Oh, it says 2020, but I'm pretty sure it's 2021.
I'm going to start this over again.
Yeah.
Going back to February of this year, not going to happen.
I don't know if you can see on my face, I had a momentary, my heart just kind of palpitated a little bit when it said, no, we're not starting this year over again. 2021 will be our, February 19th, 2021 will be our next meeting. Okay, thank you everyone, really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Bye, thank you.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas and happy holidays.